Alrighty, welcome to the stream. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we're going to cover everything you need to know to host a webinar using Zoom, from the difference between Zoom meetings and Zoom webinars. Do you even need to get Zoom webinar? To how to schedule, set up registration for a webinar, to how to host and control the webinar itself, how to manage it, all the utilities and functions you need to know. And then how to follow up, how to get the recording and give it to your attendees so that you can follow up adequately. My name is Doug Pierce. I am Horse's Mouth Associate Editor. I'm joined by Devin Kropp, my fellow Associate Editor at Horse's Mouth. Hi, Devin.
Hi, everyone.
And Chris Holman, Horse's Mouth Executive Coach. Hi, Chris. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. I mentioned kind of in the pre-show that this is somewhat of an inaugural event for us, streaming to our website. Very curious to hear from you viewers what you think, and if anything's going wrong, you're not hearing things or seeing things, definitely let me know using chat, which is embedded beneath the player on the site you're viewing this on. And of course, we want your questions. We want to know if you're using Zoom webinars, if you're using another meeting service, virtual meeting service to host your webinars and meetings. We want to know how it's going, and we definitely want to hear your questions that we can help you with. That's why we're here. That's why it's a big reason why we're doing this. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Get rid of that. So this is the plans and pricing page on zoom.us. And this is one of the primary questions we get from people whenever this topic comes up is, what's the difference between Zoom meetings and Zoom webinar? Like what is it? And to tell you the truth, the core functionality when you're in it is largely the same. But there are some differences. The key thing is with Zoom webinar, where Zoom meeting is more of an intimate exchange between you and your attendees, where everybody's sharing their video, everybody can be heard with their audio, and it's kind of like a back and forth, online chat, essentially. Webinar is different in that it's one out to many, or a few out to many, where it's you and maybe a panelist or two giving your presentation or your talk, and that's being sent out basically to your attendees who can engage with you via chat and Q&A and stuff like that. But it's not the same. Your attendees are not having a back and forth with you constantly like they are in a Zoom meeting. So if you're looking to do events where you're trying to hit a lot of people, Zoom webinars is where you need to be at, really. And so if we look over the plans and pricing page here, if you do want to use Zoom for webinars, you got to get the add-on. And to get the add-on, you need to be a Zoom Pro member. So that's the $14.99 a month here. A Zoom meeting at the Pro tier, at least, I believe the cap is it's 100 participants. So if it's worth noting that if you are doing a webinar where less than 100 people are going to be on, you can use Zoom meetings to do that. You're going to lose a little bit of functionality, but it's perfectly serviceable. But once you have a Pro plan with Zoom, you see these optional add-ons here. You can't see it yet. But one of these add-ons is add video webinars starting at $40 a month. And I think that's for like 150 attendees is the baseline webinar allowance there in terms of attendees. But you can go up to 1,000 plus attendees if you want to. Of course, it costs more money for each tier you move up. And let's see, what else do I want to mention? If there's anything else, Devin or Chris, you want to mention about the two to help distinguish for people.
Sure. Yeah. I think one thing people ask a lot, like Doug was saying, is what's different? What is the difference between meeting and webinar? And Doug, kind of summarized that up. But another that Wes has that meetings doesn't is the Q&A. Meetings you can use chat to ask and answer questions. Webinars has its own Q&A function, which is really well designed by Zoom, and it really helps organize as the presenter or whoever is moderating to see the questions coming in, and you can get rid of the ones that get answered. So that's just another difference. There's another place for people to enter their questions rather than just having everything going through the chat.
Yeah, it definitely does help you organize things. Because in chat, it's just like, wall of text.
Yeah.
You could be picking through being like, where was that great question that I really wanted to address? Who knows? But with Q&A, you can, mark questions as, yes, I want to answer this live. Once you've answered them, you can switch them over to like an answer tab. It is really handy and worth it. So, yeah, I guess that's it for the difference between meetings and webinars. Let's see if we've got any questions here. Not yet. Do know that if you are watching the stream, beneath the player is the chat where I've started a Q&A. If you go to the Q&A section, you can ask us any questions, and we will do our best to answer them. So, okay, let us move then on to the scheduling of a Zoom webinar. You've got your Zoom Pro plan at a minimum. You've added the webinar add-on. And this page is after I've logged into zoom.us, I've gone to my account, I've gone to the webinar section, and I've clicked the button, schedule a webinar. Okay? And we're just going to run you through, this is either going to be the most useful, interesting, nitty-gritty stuff you've seen, and you're going to be like writing this down, or you're going to go watch paint drying because it's more interesting to you. But let's go ahead and see here. So I'll just call this my awesome webinar. A webinar filled with awesome content. Okay, so obviously the topic is the title of your webinar. Description is where you tell people what it's going to be about. Down here, you'll see use a template. So if you do a lot of webinars, you can start form what is called a template, which basically will save your most commonly used settings. And that way you can just use a template with all those settings already done, and you don't have to redo, check all these boxes again. Really useful thing. So you set your date. So I'll do this for, let's do tomorrow at 2. Yeah, we'll keep it at 2. Your duration. Duration is kind of like a rough outline for your attendees. It's not going to stop you. If you put it at an hour, it's not going to stop you at an hour. So don't worry about that. Recurring webinar. This is if you're going to be hosting the same webinar multiple times, and literally you just want the same topic, description, settings each time, and not have to change it. And I believe the link is the same too, which is nice if you're going to be doing that and you want to just have the one link you're sending people to. Webinar password. So this is where you can put a password up for the webinar. When people register, they will get the password, and of course you can send them the password as well. It's a nice security feature if you're worried about, people getting in and Zoom bombing you. They have to have the password to do that. And then on here, you will see video. So this is by default when you get on the webinar. Is it going to share the video of the host and the panelists? It's always nice to do that. Even if you get this, you don't check this off, you can always enable your video once you're in the webinar. That's one thing with kind of most of these settings in Zoom. You can actually change it in the client. Nothing's like set in stone. There's quite a large degree of changing you can do when you're actually in and live. Going down to audio, this is if you want people to dial in over the phone to listen, or just with their computer audio, or both. I don't think there's any reason not to use both. Most people will use computer audio, but some people do prefer the phone. That webinar options here. Q&A, you generally want to have this always on unless for some reason you want to use chat only. But as we mentioned, Q&A is a nice little feature. And then enable practice session. So this means that when you start the webinar, you're actually going to go into like a little pre-webinar private room where only you and your attendees can see each other and hear what you're saying. Attendees, when they use the link to join, they'll actually just be put into like a little waiting room. If you've attended one of our webinars, you've doubtless seen this, where there's like a little, webinar has not started yet. Please stand by. Down here is the enable high definition video for the screen shared video. I would always check this unless you have not so great internet speed. Maybe you want to kind of really minimize the load you're putting on your internet. But otherwise, I would go ahead and check that. Only authenticated users can join. So this setting, this is kind of one of the like maximum security features that you can put in, where you basically have to provide Zoom, and Devin, please correct me if I'm wrong here, but you have to provide Zoom with a list of users who can get in, like their email addresses. Yeah. And if they're not on the...
one thing, you provide email addresses. So if they try to sign in with a different email address, they will not be able to get in. So, from Zoom webinar, there's less security risk of someone coming in and disrupting your meeting because they can't share their screen or their video like in Zoom meetings. But of course, if you're doing a webinar where you're sharing, very personal information that you don't want others to get, you might choose to do that. But you need to make sure that you're asking people for the email address they will use when they sign into the webinar, or they will not be able to get in.
Yeah, because if they try to use the wrong email address and you've set up authenticated users only, they're just going to keep hitting a brick wall and be like, what? They're getting frustrated. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is kind of only if you're really worried about
I wouldn't recommend
in.
it for an everyday webinar. I think the password is good security, and it's easy for the user to use. The authenticator is kind of an extra step on your part, and not really necessary for most of what webinars we would be giving.
Yeah, my philosophy is kind of put as few roadblocks in between attendees and getting into the webinar as you can.
Exactly. You don't want to lose people. Yeah.
Yeah, unless there's a good reason, unless you have a good reason not to. And then record the webinar automatically. Now, if you are concerned about not remembering to record while you're in the webinar, definitely click this. The reason I don't do it is because I don't want that kind of extra time in the beginning, because it's going to start recording as soon as you start the broadcast. And sometimes there's like a little time that goes by where you're like addressing some technical issue or something, or something unrelated to the webinar topic really is going on, and I kind of don't want that on my recording. So I won't do that. I'll do it manually. But there is nothing worse than getting like halfway through or even longer into a webinar and realizing I didn't hit the record button. So if you're worried about that at all, just go ahead and use it. But
and write yourself a note too. That's what I always do. I have a huge note that says hit record.
Checklists.
Because I have forgotten before.
Yeah, it happened. It happened. Especially if you, well, first of all, I don't think people realize when you start the webinar, there's like various things that are happening all at once. And it's very easy to get absorbed by all the different things. So, and especially if you are the one who's presenting or opening the webinar, you kind of have that for the forefront of your mind. And it's very easy to forget. So maybe go ahead and click that, but I tend not to. And then in the alternative host box, this is if you want to have somebody else on your Zoom team, right? Somebody else that has a Zoom account that's linked to your Zoom account. And they have to have a Zoom Pro account at least. They have to have that level of account to be able to do this. But they will basically have the option to host this webinar in your stead, or like have host functionality if they join in. So if maybe you're not going to be there, you want somebody else to host it, you would have to set them up with this right there. But we can go ahead and schedule it there. Okay, so let me just quickly go ahead and see if we got any questions. Okay. So George McReynolds is asking, you said get webinar if you're hosting a lot. How many is a lot? Okay, so by a lot, I mean like you have more than 100 people attending. If you have 100 people or less, you can use the Zoom meeting tool service and you run your webinars there. You're not going to have the Q&A function and a couple of other things, but you can totally get by just using the Zoom meetings. It's when you want to have more than 100 people attending your webinar that you need to worry about Zoom webinars. And there, of course, as we mentioned, there's a couple other bells and whistles like Q&A, like live streaming your webinar, which you can do, is a thing you can do. But when I say a lot, that's what I mean, is the amount of attendees you're expecting. It's not frequency, it's attendee limit.
If I can just jump into,
Absolutely.
Like Doug said, you can absolutely do a webinar in meetings. There are some extra steps you might want to take if you are using meetings, though, because people have the ability to, share their video and audio, and you may not want that if you're doing a webinar and it's too distracting. So you'll want to make sure when you're setting it up that you kind of turn off their ability to do that. So it looks more like a webinar than a meeting with everyone's, little squares of their videos coming up. So that's just something to keep in mind. You can totally make it look almost exactly the same to Zoom webinars, but there are some extra steps that you'll want to take just to make sure that it looks like you're the only presenter and that you have full control over what's going on.
Yeah, true. Yeah, the core of the functionality is the same, but yeah, you do have to kind of set things up a little differently.
But it's easy. It's very easy to do.
Yeah. And so George is saying you can't see me, but I'm nodding my head. Thanks. You got it, George. That's why we're doing this. That's why we're here. So thank you for the question. And let's see here. So Michael has asked, can you use pre-recorded webinars on Zoom? Yes, you can. So Zoom, okay, a couple things. The first thing is you can record, a video file of your presentation, of your webinar, and just play that file in the Zoom webinar with sound and let it run. And Zoom also does have a on-demand webinar feature where once you've done a webinar, you can kind of just push people to that finished webinar and have them watch it. Now, if one thing though with this is if you are going to play it's a little tricky, because the next question that comes up is, well, should I not tell people that it's pre-recorded and kind of keep going with the live feel? And my take is that I wouldn't lie about it. I wouldn't try to deceive people, but just kind of just do it, just go with it. And but I wouldn't just openly fake it. If somebody is asking, just let them know. Also, one nice thing about doing it pre-recorded too is that you can attend and answer questions in chat or Q&A. Your attention is fully devoted to that, versus when you're presenting, some people can, like Jeff Levine, our Savvy Tax and Savvy IRA guru. He's really good about monitoring Q&A and chat and everything and presenting. But some people like me, not so good at switching back and forth. So, but that is kind of a benefit where you use a pre-recorded webinar, your attention, your mental resources are freed up to be more engaging in the chat and Q&A. So thank you for that question, Michael. And okay, so let's get back to our scheduled webinar here. We have scheduled it. As you can see, there are reminders that you can add to your own Google Outlook or Yahoo calendars. These are actually for you, so don't copy these links. On the registration page, your registrants will have their own reminder links, but these are just for you. So don't copy these links and send these out. So let's see here. You got an overview of your kind of settings here. Let's get down to the bottom here. After you've scheduled your webinar, this bottom part of the screen, the settings screen, is really where you're going to want to move your attention. So invitations, invite panelists. So this is if you're going to have somebody else on the webinar with you, who's going to be, talking, presenting. Maybe they're the primary presenter, and you're going to be, in the host role. You want to set them up as a panelist. That means they come in and then they're in their own little field or area with you in the webinar, where you can clearly see, here are my panelists. They're separate from attendees. You want them to come on as a panelist. It is possible to take an attendee and make them a panelist in the webinar itself, but you should just set somebody up as a panelist. And I'll go ahead and quickly do that now. So Devin, I'm going to reveal your email here, I think.
Oh no,
Devin, don't contact her. No. So I've just added Devin. As you can see here, I've got the checkbox to send her a notification immediately, which has all the information she needs to attend as a panelist, including setting up reminders. And you can keep going. You can have multiple. It doesn't have to be just one panelist. It could be. I'm actually not sure what the limit is on it, but it's a few. It's at least like 5 or so, or maybe more. But don't quote me on that. I'm not sure 100%. Okay, so down here you will see. Actually, I haven't done something here. I need to edit this webinar because I did not enable something. Must have missed it here. Yeah, registration required. So if you're not seeing a registration link on the setting page after you scheduled it, it's because you have not clicked this box. I want to be able to set up registration. I want people to be able to register for the webinar. Definitely. Now you'll see that changes. I get some more functionality down here. You'll see now it's called a registration link. So this is the link, and you can just easily click this button to copy it. That you can, you guys see, yeah, okay. So that you can send. Now it's very bare bones. In a minute, we're going to talk about how you can make it look a little better. But this is a registration page where somebody can go and, it's got the details, the topic, the summary, and, the time. And you just have to put in your name, first, last name, your email address. You can make people input more information if you want to, like location, telephone number, all that kind of stuff. But again, I'm of the mind that you want to put the fewest steps in between somebody signing up for your webinar and attending. So name and email, though, are absolutes. They have to do that.
Yes.
To be able to. And on the top here, you can see that when somebody clicks your registration link for your webinar, they do have the ability to share the webinar to other people. So Zoom kind of makes it easy, has that kind of built in. You can disable that, but unless your webinar is like a private affair where you only want a select group of people attending, there's no reason not to have your registrants share it. So, okay, let's get back down to the settings here. You can see source tracking link. So basically what that lets you do is set up multiple registration links so that you can send out those registration links in different channels. Like maybe one goes out in your newsletter, one goes out you send out in social media, one you just have on your website. And that way Zoom is going to pay attention to how many people and who click on what link, so you can go in after the fact and be like, wow, I got like the most people actually signed up on Facebook. I should probably promote my webinars more on Facebook, or something went wrong on my other marketing efforts there.
That's really cool too. If you're going to do any advertising for your events on Facebook or even like LinkedIn, and you want to do different ads and test them, that's a really cool way to see. Facebook has its own tracking capabilities, but that's just an additional way to see which ad is performing. You can do one link for one ad, one link for another, and that's really handy if you're into that kind of marketing testing scenario.
Yeah, if you want to improve your the return, you gotta pay attention, right? You gotta pay attention to that stuff. Okay, so down here in this next section, we have approval, with the default is automatically approved. That just means when somebody registers, they automatically get registered in Zoom's back end, and they get the registration confirmation with all they need to attend. You can change this so that it's manual approval, where you as the host has to approve every single registrant that comes in. You have to literally go in and be like, okay, yeah, Bill registered for my webinar. Yeah, he's good. He can get in. Again, this is something, if you do want to keep your walled garden in place, maybe you want to have that manually approve. But for the most part, you're going to want as many people as you can get, and automatically approving is the way to go for that, unless you want to. It could get time intensive too if you're manually approving everybody, because you got to keep checking in, to see who's registered. So these options, I don't really mess with these too much. Close registration after the event date. I really don't want people registering unless it's hasn't happened yet. Allow attendees to join from multiple devices. I'm actually not sure why you wouldn't want that set. Show social media buttons on the registration page. Again, we talked about that. If you don't want people to be able to share the webinar registration page on their social media accounts, you would get rid of this. Again, if you do want it private, if you want to keep that walled garden in place, you would want to get rid of that. Now down here you can see manage attendees. You can see how many registrants you have, and you can import a CSV of the registrants that you get, and you can kind of view the list. There's nobody in there now, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that is. Okay, so that's the invitations tab. Next, moving on to the email settings. Down here you can see, this has to do with the emails that Zoom is automatically going to send out to people, to your panelists, to your registrants. You probably want that in English, but you can change that, what language the emails come in. Your contact information. So basically that's the, I don't know if it's the reply email, but that's the email that in these automated messages is going to tell people, you got any questions, email that person right there. So if you have maybe an assistant who you want to be dealing with people's questions about the event, maybe put your assistant's email there, or some kind of, more like a broader email address you use for multiple queries that you have support staff on. Invitation email to panelists, you can kind of change. I think you could just, basically you have the option, do you send one or not to your panelists? I think that's always a good idea. Confirmation email to registrants, send upon registration. That's when somebody registers, Zoom will send them an email with all the info they need to join, and letting them know, yes, they're good, they're registered, they're ready to attend. You can send yourself a preview of this, and you can also get in here and edit it. You can change the subject line, and you can customize the body a bit. You can't, and you can put a footer in here, down here. You can't really change the core of the information. I don't know why you would want to, but here you can see when somebody registers, they get the links they need, they get the calendar reminders, they get the iPhone One Tap, and they get the teleconference information if they want to just dial in over their phone. So that's that.
And Doug, just to clarify, this registration and email, this is only a feature on webinars. You can't do this in meetings, correct?
Yes, that's a great point. Yeah, if you do want the ability to have people register for an event, you're going to have the webinars add-on. If you're doing your webinars with Zoom meetings, you're going to have to do all this stuff on your own end, whether that's, you're going to have to curate your list of people who's going to, or be responsible for sending people the information they need to send. Thank you for mentioning that, Devin, because that's huge. This is a big time saver for sure, and definitely is a key feature of Zoom webinars. Let's see. So the reminder email. Okay, this is good. So by default, there's none, but you can set it up so that Zoom will automatically send out reminder emails to your attendees and your panelists at these intervals: an hour before the webinar, a day before the webinar, and a week before. Definitely, I would say at least an hour before and a day before you want to do, but maybe a week before, depending on how long you've been promoting it. If you've been promoting it for a while, maybe people have forgotten about it. A week before, you want to do that. And again, you can customize the subject line, and your footer. But as you can see, it's pretty straightforward. Topic, when it is, the calendar reminders, and all the information they need to get in or join the teleconference. So go ahead and save that. And let's see here. So then we move on to, and again, you can send yourself a preview to see what it looks like. Then a follow-up. So there's two different follow-up emails that you can have Zoom send for you. There's the one to people who attended the webinar, and there's one to people who registered for it, but they didn't show up. So they are absentees. And this is nice, where I won't get into it because it's very similar to the reminders, but basically you can customize a message to say, hey, to attendees, hey, thanks for joining. Remember, if you found it useful, sign up to my newsletter or whatever. Really good for reinforcing your call to action or sending like the replay link or whatever. For absentees, I would say definitely in that email message, you might want to, sorry you weren't able to attend. Here's the replay is available. You can watch it here. That kind of thing. So that's it for email settings. Moving over to branding here. Let me just quickly check in and see if we have any questions here before we move into branding. Okay, no, I guess we're good. Okay, so in branding, this is where you can make that registration page look better. You can change the title to whatever you want to. You can call it a masterclass, right? You want to call it investing masterclass. There's a big debate going on about whether you should use the word webinar. I was just going to say, some people are like, don't call it a webinar. Call it anything but a webinar. And other people are like, call it a webinar.
What else would you call it?
A masterclass, educational session, class.
Training session, I've heard a lot. I've seen that a lot.
You're just you're rebranding it. But some people think that the term webinar has got a lot of baggage. And that when people hear it because they've been invited to a bazillion webinars over the years, that you want to avoid that association and call it something else, something that's a little more exciting in the minds of people. So that said, when people hear webinar, they pretty much know it's going to be an informative presentation that they're going to learn something from. So there's that. Okay, so let's go over to the banner, and this is where we find out if I have got my I'll set up here, and I do. So in this example, I should have titled it as such. I've got the assets for an advisor client member webinar. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that in. You see we've got the advisor client banner there, and then you've got your logo, and for this I've got that right there. This little visual. You can add descriptions, but it's not necessary. The images pretty much speak for themselves. So here you've got your speakers, which you can put a photo and some bio information about your speakers. Right, you can do the title, the organization, and the biography, up to 1,000 characters. But just realize there's a limit to how much people are going to read on your webinar registration page. So maybe don't go too crazy there. Just a tip there.
Yeah, if they've already made it to the registration page, they're already interested, so you don't need to sell them more at that point. Just want to get them to, as easy as possible, type in their information and move to the next phase.
Yeah, because they hear something that sounds exciting on TV. They got a ping from their email. You don't want one of those things to sabotage them signing up. So keep it pretty minimal. So here you can change your theme. Zoom's default theme is pretty good. That's basically the colors of the registration page. Zoom's is this kind of like light blue and white and gray. You can change that to your colors. These colors actually kind of fit the advisor client branding, so I kind of leave them there. The post attendee URL. This is a handy one. So basically, after your webinar is over and you've ended it, people are going to get pushed to this URL. So if you have a newsletter sign-up form, your website, any other place you want to send people, this is where you put in that link. And it's actually, I feel like it's kind of hidden in Zoom settings. So definitely pay note of that. you can set it up so you can do a survey. You can survey your attendees. I'm not going to set that up now, but you can do that. And social media share description. This is where when people register and they have the share functionality on social media, you can customize that automated message that they get. And the nice thing is that your logo and banner can be included, will show up in those social media shares. Okay, so I don't think there's a save button down here. No, it's already saved, I believe. So let's go back then real quick and see our registration page and how it has changed. I really hope that saves automatically. I don't have to redo that. It does. Okay, so you can see it's a little nicer, a little easier on the eye. People get a clearer sense of who's putting this on and what it's going to be about. So that's your kind of space to make it look a little more attractive. Okay, I'm not going to get too deep in the polls and Q&A, but suffice it to say that you can set up polls. You can do it ahead of time. This is also another thing that you can do in the Zoom client, kind of impromptu, but you can set up single choice and multiple choice polling questions for people where, it is a good engagement feature, right? Engagement is very important for anything you're doing online to keep people's attention spans just aren't that great, especially when they're not seeing an actual person. They're looking at their screen and they have multiple web browser tabs and, programs all saying, look at me, click me. So you can set up polls there. Q&A, you've got to customize the Q&A a little bit. This is, again, the Zoom webinar exclusive feature. You can allow people to be anonymous. I think that's nice if somebody doesn't want their name to be shown in the Q&A, because once somebody asks a question in the Q&A feature, you can show that to everybody on the webinar. And some people, I've had people be like, "Did you just make that public?" And I'll be like, "Yeah." Yeah. But to people, public to other people on the webinar. And we go down here and you can say that attendees can view answered questions only, or, and this is actually a beta feature, they can see all questions that have been asked. And I kind of like the idea of this because they can upvote the questions and comment on other people's questions. I feel like this is good because, again, it's all about engagement. That they're building on their own, that your attendees are building on your own. You're not managing this. Somebody is seeing a question that somebody else saw and said, "Oh, I'm upvoting this. I really want to have that answered too." Or they've been like, "Oh yeah, Corey, that was a great question. I wanted. Have you used GoToMeeting? I'm curious about that too." That kind of thing. So I'm kind of high on that. I'm gonna start pushing to switch some of our webinars to use that. Integration. This is kind of like a next level thing, but you can set it up where some different marketing solutions. They have a Pardot in here, but I know like Salesforce and stuff like that. You can have it so that when somebody registers for a webinar, it's automatically getting populated in your email service provider or some other marketing platform. Save your time, automated. Definitely worth looking into, but I'm not going to get into the weeds here. And then you can live stream your webinars. So if you want to live stream to your Facebook page, or I don't have much experience with Facebook Workplace, but that's a Facebook thing, right, Devin? Workplace?
Yeah.
I think it is, yeah. I guess that's for like Teams.
I think so. I'm not quite sure either,
Yeah.
but I think they own it at this point.
Yeah, okay. One of the many things that Facebook bought. And then YouTube. You can stream to YouTube. I don't think that Zoom is the perfect streaming solution. If you are going to stream, I think you're better off using something dedicated for streaming. But certainly if you want your webinars to have a wider reach, why not? And then the nice thing about streaming too is that if people are trying to get into your webinar and you have a limit, like maybe you have the low tier webinar add-on that's capped at like 200 people or whatever, and that 201st person goes to get on, they will be stopped. They can't get in. But if you're streaming and you have this option enabled, Zoom's going to tell them, hey, this webinar is at full capacity, but it's being streamed on YouTube. So why don't you go to this person's YouTube channel and you can watch it there. So kind of a nice feature there. And that is the last of the settings for setting up your Zoom webinar and your registration page. After that's done, again, you can go to the invitations tab. Remember to get your registration link. That is what you're going to send to people to have them sign up. That's the key link. That's where you find it. They make it really easy. They have a little button here that you just have to click to copy the link. All right, you don't even have to drag and copy the whole thing. They do it for you. And then you're good to go. You can start the webinar. So that's scheduling. I'm going to kind of take a question break. I think we just lost Chris here. He's done. He just wanted to see the scheduling. He's out. But let's see here. Okay, we do have some questions that have come in, Devin. Chris, if you can hear me, we lost your video. So I don't know if there was like an auto shut off or something, or you quit in disgust. But anyway, here is some questions we got here. This one is from Tim. So Tim is asking, in webinar mode, when someone asks a question, do all the attendees see the question, or is it visible only to me? Okay, so we kind of just talked about this a little bit. The question is, it depends on how you set it up in Zoom, but by default, the questions that people submit into Q&A are only viewed by you and other panelists, you as the host and other panelists, until you choose to make that different, until you choose to share it with all the attendees, which you can do. Now, as I just covered, Zoom has a beta feature which you can get into the webinar settings tab in the Q&A tab here, where you can edit these settings and change it so that actually all questions that people ask are viewed by everybody on the webinar. People can upvote them and people can comment on them. So I hope that answers your question there. Let's see here. We've got an anonymous question here. Let's see here. So, Chris, you're back. Great. So what type of camera are you using? Top presenter screen. It is amazingly clear. Why, thank you. So this this is a DSLR camera. It's a Canon 80D that I have hooked up to an Elgato 4K cam link, which is basically a USB capture card plugged into my computer. This is going to get you obviously your best image quality. If you're looking to impress people, definitely go this route. Just know that it's really hard to get to get capture cards right now, like really hard. But it's also really hard to get webcams.
Yeah.
So webcams are kind of the direction I steer most people who don't want to get into the weeds with it. Because just know if you're using, a quote unquote real camera, you've got to fuss with the settings, right? You've got to make sure it's properly exposed. You've got to make sure your white balance is correct. It definitely makes the barrier to entry a little higher, which some people don't want to mess with that. But if you're into AV stuff, definitely look into that for sure. Thank you for the question. Let's see here. So another anonymous question. Will a recording of this be available? Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm pretty sure that actually on this page you're on, horsesmouth.com/horsesmouth-live, as soon as it's done processing, you're going to be able to watch a replay right away, right on here. But yes, we will have a replay available for you. Okay, that is it for questions so far. So let's move on to the hosting itself. Are you ready? Here we go. I'm saying it like I think something's really going to go wrong. You notice that? Yeah. This is how not to do it,
Doug has probably done this about 500 times for everyone on this call.
I'm
he is our go-to webinar host.
I'm waiting for Guinness to give me a call. Guinness Book of World Records to be like, guess what, Doug? Most webinars hosted. It's you. Congratulations. Okay, so this, you're actually seeing my my second computer that I'm using here. You're seeing my my boom arm here. Sorry about that. But so Zoom is automatically registering the camera that I have set up here. It's going to ask you to join computer audio. Now, here's the first key thing. Before you just click join with computer audio, go to test speaker and microphone. Okay, do yourself a lot of favors here. Do this every time. Okay, here you can hear the ringtone. If you're not hearing the ringtone, ringtone, it automatically went on. Now it's picking up my microphone. As you can hear, it plays it back to you, letting you know that it's correct.
As you can hear, it plays it back to you.
The dulcet tones of my voice. And then if you're not hearing it, though, you can change it to a different microphone here. And I'm going to stop that because it's starting to annoy me really bad. But basically, that lets you make sure that you are hearing things through the speakers you want to be hearing things through. And the people on the webinar are going to be hearing your voice correctly through the microphone you want them to hear you through. Right? A lot of times we'll see where maybe you have a USB microphone, something like the Samsung G-Track Pro or the Blue Yeti or something, and maybe Zoom it's not using that as the microphone. It's using your built-in microphone on your laptop. You don't want that. It's not going to sound as good. You want to change it here and make sure your Blue Yeti or whatever microphone is selected. Okay, we're good there. So we're going to join with computer audio. And as you can see with this webinar, I see the practice mode banner letting you know that I have started the webinar, but it's not broadcasting for all my attendees yet. I am in a private cocoon here where my panelists can come in and we can discuss the flow of the webinar or various things or troubleshoot any issues. After that, the first thing I want to bring people's attention to is down the bottom left-hand corner where you can access that audio test and the audio settings where you can change your microphone and speakers. You can get to that at any time clicking this little arrow right here. You can select different microphones, different speakers, and you can test your speaker and microphone. And you can also mute yourself with this button as well. And then video, you can also click this little icon here to change which camera Zoom is using, and you can change, you can play around with virtual background if you want to, make people laugh, be on the beach or something. And then video settings where you can I'll bring them up here. Why not? You can make sure that, you want to be high definition, mirror your video, touch up my appearance. Oh, I had that selected. So vain. Okay, and then for those that don't know, the touch up your appearance will kind of like smooth out wrinkles and all that kind of thing. It's a wonderful feature. It's a wonderful feature. Yeah, it is a wonderful feature. And then moving right along here, we got our first
like
of all.
You needed, Devin.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Chris.
And moving right along to the participant panel here. Here's where you're going to see everybody who's on your webinar. As you can see, it's split into panelists and attendees. So you as the host and all your panelists are going to show up here, and your attendees, I have none, are going to show up right here. And one handy thing to know is that you can mute people through here. You can stop their camera through here. Okay, I can't do that to myself because it's me. You can also eject people from here. So if somebody is being a rabble-rouser and distracting your attendees, and they said, don't work with this guy, he's a bum, you can eject them from here. You can eject him using that. And then down here, you can see you can invite people. Most often, you're going to use this maybe for your panelist who's not showing up, and you're like, what? There's like 2 minutes to go. Where are they? And you can also mute everybody and right there as well. In case you've opened up the line to some attendees, which is something you can do in Zoom webinars, you can quickly just blanket mute them. You're getting some background noise. Just mute everybody. Right, just stop it. And then you can unmute people to prevent that background noise or to find it in the first place. Who's giving you the background noise. Then you get some more controls here. Remember, this is that Zoom will let you change many of these settings that are available on setup right on the fly. So you can see here, mute panelists on entry. You pretty much want your panelists to be able to talk, but you can allow people to unmute themselves, mute themselves. You can play a sound whenever someone joins or leaves, which would be really annoying if it does that for every attendee, actually. Definitely don't want to do that. Now here's a security feature. So lock webinar right here. So this is what you want to use if you want no more people in. Or maybe somebody you've ejected is somehow finding their way back in. Somebody really wants to disrupt your webinar. You eject them and then you lock it. Nobody can get back in. You can allow attendees to raise their hand, view the participant count. That means that your people who have joined you on your webinar, do you want them to see how many other people are on? Maybe you do. That could be a engaging thing. Oh, wow, there's like 50 other people on. Cool. But maybe you don't want them to see that there's like 2 people on. That's where you would change that. And then you can set what video layout you want people to see. By default, it's set to view host, which is a good thing to leave it on. But if you do want people to see the active speaker view, you can click that. And active speaker is whoever's talking. Their video comes front and center up in Zoom. So if I'm talking right now and we were in a Zoom call and not streaming to you, I would be full screen talking. Appearing, my video would be full screen in the Zoom window. And then gallery view, that you guys have all seen this, where it's everybody's video feed on the screen all at one time, and it makes it smaller and moves it around the more feeds you get, so that everybody, or as many people as it can fit, go there. So that's it for the participant functionality. Moving on to Q&A. As we mentioned here, this is where you can manage your Q&A. When questions come in, they will come into the Open tab, where you can dismiss them, or you can mark it that, yes, I want to answer this live. And then you can mark it to let you know, to give you a visual indicator of, I wanted to answer that question, so you can easily go back and find it. Or you can move, yes, that question's answered, and move it over to the Answered tab, which is where all questions are going to go, unless you dismiss that you've answered and have told Zoom you've answered. Unless you've dismissed them, they'll go to Dismissed. And as you can see, that is a lot less clunky than the chat panel, which I'll go to now, which is where you can send private messages to your panelists. Be like, hey, Rhonda, I can hear your dogs barking. Can maybe you mute yourself, when you're not talking, that'd be great, or whatever. But you can also talk to all panelists and attendees. So that's for everybody on the webinar. You can send a text message to right there. And this is where you'll get private messages from attendees and other panelists. You'll be able to see them there. So really, chat is intended to be like a pure information tool, where you're just sending your attendees details, information, links that you want to give them. And the questions and the answer things should go to the Q&A. But however, just be prepared that many people are still going to ask their questions into chat. It's kind of the most comfortable thing for a lot of people. Chat. People hear chat. That's where they put their text input into. So just be ready for that. I skipped over polls. So as I mentioned, any polls that you pre-set up when you're setting up the webinar will appear here, and you can just initialize them. And you can also do things like share the results with people. Devin, I think you've had more experience with this with me recently. If you have any
it's a really cool feature for just like bringing up engagement and making people feel like they're not the only one on the webinar, because they can't really see anyone else other than the presenter and them. So we've used it to ask some technical questions of more like a quiz and see, do people understand what we've gone through? It's a really good way to gauge the room to see if what you've been saying they understand. We've also done it for more fun things like, who here, wants to take a 15-minute break, stuff like that. So it's a really nice way to keep engagement up, to communicate with your participants in a different way, because it allows everyone to participate. Once you set it live, it basically pops up on their screen. They choose their answer, and then you'll kind of see, as the host, you'll see the percentage of people who have answered, and at any time you can choose to publish those results live. So everyone will then see the results of the poll. I think it's a really great way, especially if you're teaching a technical topic. I think it's really, really impactful to make sure people are paying attention and make sure they understand what they're saying. But it can also be used, like I said, for a more fun kind of question, or, see what's going on with people. Just kind of is a nice way to make it feel like a community.
Yeah.
But it's super easy to use, so definitely try it out.
So why not, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times I've seen a lot of people will say the best practice is to have like a super easy poll question to answer at the beginning, just to get people comfortable interacting. And they're more likely then to ask a question or engage in chat or what have you. So it's kind of like a good...
I think too, you can make it so the results are anonymous, which I tend to do when doing it, because people don't want to be called out for being wrong, especially if it's a technical question.
Yeah, right.
I think it's a checkbox you can set when you're doing the question, which might be nice for doing something like that.
Yeah. What is 2 + 2? And somebody puts 5.
Yeah.
It's like, Daryl answered...
Yeah.
It's 5. Oh, man, Daryl's leaving the webinar immediately.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's see. Let's move on to share screen. So this is obviously an incredibly important function here. This is what you're gonna use to share any PowerPoint presentation you have set up. This is where you're gonna share any video that you want to play, any other monitor, anything you've got up on another monitor. You're going to want to use this. So go ahead and click that. As you can see here, Zoom is going to automatically sort of recognize any webinar, any browser tabs I've got open, any programs I've got open, and you just click on them. If you've got a PowerPoint open, you would just click on the PowerPoint. If you want, be mindful though that in the bottom here, if you do want sound, if you're sharing a video with sound, you want to have this checked, or people are not going to hear the sound from the video. So definitely click that. And also if you're sharing a video that you're making full screen, or I guess just in any event, you want to click this box as well to optimize sharing for video clip. Just let Zoom know that you're sharing video so that they can display that to your viewers in the best way possible for them. Do keep in mind you can do a whiteboard. That's if you want to, draw on a whiteboard. Maybe you're doing a brainstorming session. This is really kind of, I feel like, more of a meeting tool, but I guess there's some application for webinars as well. And you can also share, if you've got an iPhone or iPad, you can share the screen of that as well, which I believe if you have like the PowerPoint app and you've got your PowerPoint up on your iPad or your iPhone, you can share your iPad screen or your iPhone screen, and then just go through the PowerPoint there, and that'll free up your other monitor to see the webinar, the controls of the webinar and everything like that. Advanced, that's kind of if you want to just...
Excuse me.
Yeah, sure.
Doug, I have a call with a client in just a minute.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I have to run, but this is just terrific.
Okay, thank you, Chris. You got it. I appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay.
Devin, thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
And so as you can see here in the advanced, who knows walking through all this was going to take so long, but like I said, this is the most interesting. Yeah, this is yes, that's right. That's what we'll tell ourselves. Like I said, this is the most interesting thing in the world to you, or you're like, I'm out of here. But if you're on this far, it's interesting to you. So in the advanced tab, you can see that you can share a portion of your screen. Let's say you want to share just a section of something you've got up on a web browser. You can do it there. I don't really use that too often. Music or computer sound only. If you want to have some music going on in the background, you can use this. Content from a second camera. If there's a second camera connected to your computer, you can have another camera feed coming into the Zoom meeting, which is cool. This would be really handy if you're doing something that involves like your hands. I don't know, you're doing like a craft webinar and you're like knitting, and you've got a second overhead camera connected to your computer that Zoom can show, so you can see your face and you knitting at the same time. That'd be really useful for that. And then files, if you've got something cloud-based stored, like a PowerPoint or something, or an image or video, you can just go ahead and find it in here and share it from here. You don't have to download it onto your computer to do it. And that's it for share. Moving on to record. So record.
The all-important button.
The all-important button. It does light up red when it's recording, so you know, and there is an indicator that comes up on here. But if you have a free Zoom meeting account, you only get the option to record on this computer, which is recording locally to your computer. Notably, if something happens to your internet connection, or if something happens to your computer, it's going to mar the recording. If you get kicked out of the meeting, the recording is going to stop. If you record to the cloud, which is what we normally do, Zoom is going to record it on their back end. And even if you get dropped even if your internet drops and you have to come back in, nothing happens to the recording. It still goes on. Your webinar still goes on. If there's another panelist, they're still on talking. No attendees get kicked out. And if you record to the cloud, the recording's fine. So that's why we recommend everybody do it. And also, if you record to the cloud, after it's done processing on Zoom's end, which can take, anywhere from like 10 minutes to, 4 hours or so, I've seen, you can immediately share that link with people. It's immediately hosted on Zoom, and you can use it and share it with people. Whereas if you record locally to your computer, you then have to take that recording, I think it's an MP4, you have to host it somewhere, and then you have to share that link. So it just, it's a couple more, painful steps there that you don't want to do. So I would always record to the cloud. As you can see, it does not turn red, but up in the top left, you get a little recording icon, which everybody else in the webinar will get as well, so they know that it's being recorded. Let's see, what did I minimize here? Oh yeah, there's also the live streaming where you have that ability to go live to your Facebook page or YouTube, or live on Workplace by Facebook. Okay, there we go. Right there. And that, Devin, that's kind of it. That's really it for the controls that I can think of. Is there anything else I kind of missed? Anything else you want to point out as kind of a key feature? I know you're pretty high on polling.
I think you've got it. Yeah. I would just recommend, if you're going to be doing this and hosting a webinar, definitely set up some practice sessions for yourself and get on and practice sharing your slides, especially if you're in a scenario, and this is something we do recommend, your video can be really powerful, and you may not want to show, the split between your screen and your video. Sometimes you might want it just to be your video, and that you can do just by turning off your sharing, but you might want to go through it a couple times and just make sure you're comfortable with doing it before, you're live and people are there watching you. So, it's always a good thing to do. Have, someone on your team come on and just make sure it looks good from their point of view, and that you feel comfortable doing those things.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Test.
Yeah.
You don't want to have your live webinar be the first time you are going through this production workflow. Okay. Do just one test run where you have somebody else on and you're just clicking all the buttons, playing with all the functionality. It's going to save you so many headaches when you actually go live. That's not the time to be wondering, how do I fix that? How do I do that? You don't want to be doing that. So thank you. And then your other point too about going, stopping your sharing so that your full screen video, when you're making, like maybe you're sharing like a personal story, or you're going to be talking at length away from the slides. That's such a good tip, because anything you can do to change up what people are seeing. Like think about like a movie or a television show and how many times they're changing that shot. It's like 2-3 seconds. It's constantly changing. You kind of want to, obviously you're not going to do that, but it just goes to show you that the more you can kind of change up what people are seeing, the more engaged they're going to be. So that's a great tip. Thank you for that, Devin. Okay, so let's go back to here. We've got Perma Chris looking for a button, exit button going on here. Okay, let's see if we got any questions that have come in. I do not see any more questions. Oh, wait,
another thing I'll mention in the meantime, while people are typing in questions, is it's really useful to have someone on your team on the webinar with you and monitoring the chat and the Q&A, so you can really focus on presenting. It's really difficult, as Doug was mentioning before, as the presenter to kind of be doing all of those things at the same time. I present a ton of webinars, and like I cannot do the Q&A and the chat and the slides at the same time. It's just too much, especially when you're focused on, giving a good presentation to clients and prospects. You don't want to be worrying about someone in the chat saying, my sound's not working, or am I going to get a recording of this? Definitely, if you have someone on your team who can be on with you, definitely have them on and let them know what their responsibilities are and have them kind of be that person, so you can just focus on presenting and doing your job there. So definitely, especially for your first time, get somebody else on there with you.
Yeah, and when you're doing it solo and trying to host and manage and present, that's when you have things like, oh, I forgot to record and I just didn't notice until it's over.
Yes.
Or people can't even hear me because my microphone is muted. And I don't even realize. I give the whole presentation. I don't even realize. You know what I mean? That's when you have those kind of issues, which are so easily avoidable when you have somebody else to either chat with you or just to come on and say, "Hey, Doug, you're muted."
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So you definitely want that, especially when you're starting out. But I think it's a nice touch always too, because they can introduce you and kind of make it seem a little bit more formal in that sense. So definitely think about having someone else on.
And we have a question, another anonymous question that has come in. Just to be sure, to have access to all this, you need to get Zoom Pro for $15 a month and add webinar services for $40 a month. So yes, to get the Zoom webinar functionality, you need to have a Pro plan, which is it $15 or $19? I should actually.
I think it's $14.99. I think.
$14.99. Yeah, so that's the floor. You need the Pro plan, the Zoom Pro plan. And you can then get the video webinar add-on, which starts, the lowest tier of that is $40. And just to let you know that with Zoom, the floor, the add-ons keep coming, okay? Because you will run out of cloud storage. You will find that with your webinars, you need more slots for more attendees. So just be mindful that, the add-ons are likely to keep rolling. But yes, that is the minimum you need is the Zoom Pro plan and then the Zoom add-on to start doing this. So thank you.
So about $55 a month for that.
Yeah.
Just still a pretty good deal with all the other platforms.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I mean, Zoom, this is kind of a side rant, but that's one of the reasons why we like Zoom, is just because it just works for people. People can just get in and do what they want to do. Okay, let's see here. Victor, by the way, most firms have Pro Series for all advisors. Okay, so then, thank you, Victor. Most likely you're good. You just would have to get a webinar add-on. So thank you for that.
One other thing I've heard from some advisors I've worked with, just as a reminder for always, to check with your compliance before putting on webinars. Some of them have an issue with the chat feature, and so you might be forced to really use the Q&A. It differs from firm to firm, and some don't care, but you definitely want to check and make sure what the rules are for that before getting started doing anything, because I have heard some stories of certain things not being allowed or preferred. So just another reminder.
Yeah, so if your Pavlovian response to check with compliance doesn't kick in automatically.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure everyone listening already knows that, but it's worth repeating because I've had multiple advisors tell me things about chat and Q&A and the difference between them from a compliance standpoint.
Okay, and then moving on to like the follow-up. I'm not going to get into the weeds here, but just know that after you're done, you've recorded your webinar. It then is going to take, like I said, anywhere from 20 minutes to a few hours for your webinar recording to process. And then you can go right into the Zoom website to your account, and then you go into the recordings button, and you'll see a listing of all your recorded webinars. You click the one you're interested in, and it'll flat out give you the link that you can share with people, and you can preview it there. super easy. So we've gone over an hour, so I won't belabor it anymore. But let's see here. That's it for questions. We've talked about everything I wanted to talk about. So I think that's a good place to wrap it. So Devin, thank you so much for joining me today. It was great having your commentary.
Thanks, Doug.
And your feedback on everything. And Ghost Image Chris, thanks for being here again. And for you attending, I hope you found this helpful. Again, I'm kind of like prototyping streaming as opposed to hosting, doing these kind of things through a webinar interface. So if you liked it, do let me know if you want more of this. If you want more on topics, let us know as well. Webinars@horsesmelt.com. I actually should have had that set up as a banner. Webinars@horsesmelt.com is a good email to reach me and let us know if you want more. And thank you so much again for joining us, and be safe, take care, and until the next webinar or stream.
Yeah.
we will see you then. So bye everybody.